if we look at this, the timing says there's got to be a bust up about something. Welcome to Off Court Cuts. We're having a special segment today because of the fact of breaking news from yesterday. Juan Carlos Ferrero, the coach of Carlos Alcaraz, has decided to part company. We don't know whose decision it was, but after 6-7 years, who can believe it? You win Coach of the Year, Juan Carlos Ferrero. Carlos Alcaraz is Player of the Year. It's a shock. He ends the season world number one. He's won 6 majors, 2 in the year, 8 tournaments. He's done it all. And midway through the offseason, deciding to part company. We know it's nothing to do with the finances because he's just signed a $200 million deal with Nike. On top of that, Juan Carlos being a former world number one French Open champion. It's not about that. It's about relationship, I believe, communication, maybe playing too many tournaments, too many exhibitions, enjoying his life outside of tennis. This is a shocker to have this happen at this moment. Kevin, what are your thoughts?
Greg, I think what you've said about timing is interesting. If this was going to happen, I think for Carlos, he would have done it at the end of the year, at the end of the ATP finals. He would have looked at it and thought, right, we make an announcement. Thank you, Juan Carlos, for your amazing help, and we move on. And that would have felt like a natural kind of time to break. With it happening now, it feels like they've been working together for the last month. Carlos has obviously been doing some of these exhibitions, which maybe is a factor in this. I'm pretty sure Juan Carlos wouldn't have been too keen, having got injured at the ATP finals and also on the Asian swing, to then head off to America to claim extra money. As you say, he's just signed a huge deal, and money is not a factor here. So Juan Carlos would have wanted him, I'm sure, to spend this 8 weeks of the off season really working on getting ready for Melbourne. And you look at Yannick Sinner, that's what he's doing. He's not playing exhibitions. And then suddenly we see Carlos popping up in these matches against Tiafoe and whatever else. And he doesn't need to be doing that at this point of the season, pretty much. And the Netflix documentary last year was interesting. Or this year actually was interesting in so much as Juan Carlos spoke about the Ibiza trips after he won the French Open. He wasn't too keen. And there was this level of professionalism that he felt Alcaraz needed to get to the Federer, Nadal, Djokovic levels. And that's always been bubbling under the surface. It almost like Juan Carlos had a slightly different mindset to what his charge has, kind of thing. So that's bubbling under the surface. He would have wanted that to be a little bit more professional on Carlos's side. Carlos is his own man. He's 22 years old. He doesn't need to be told what to do anymore. These two have been working together since he was a child. Maybe he just thinks, I want to be my own man now. But there's a few interesting little sidelines before I throw it to Ashley. He trains at the Juan Carlos Ferrero Academy. So where's he going to train now? Who's going to work with him? Juan Carlos does a lot of the warm-ups with him. We might be able to talk about this later, Greg, that can Sammy Lopez do warm-ups at Juan Carlos Ferrero's level? I'm pretty sure he can't. So there's another issue. The whole team is built around this academy, the Ferrero Academy. What's going to happen to Carlos now? And how many weeks are we from the Australian Open? Not too far off. He's not going to be there. So it's an interesting dynamic as to where this is going to go now. They actually in a perfect position to tell us about sort of what it means to work with a young player from the start. Obviously, none of us have been lucky enough to work with someone of Carlos's level, but how hard is it going to be actually to replace Juan Carlos Ferrero? I mean, he's like the only coach he's ever had. It's going to be difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they started working together when Carlos was 15, and it's at that age, it is a pivotal time in his career. And I think, to take somebody from 15 to winning as many slams as he has at his young age is just unbelievable. It's incredible. And you can see from their relationship how close they were, almost family-like. I think Juan Carlos described him as his fourth child. And in some ways, speaking as a coach that's worked with lots of junior players, and you build this relationship not just with the player, but with the family as well. And sometimes the danger of working so closely with somebody as they have is the lines can start to become a bit blurred, and the relationship over time can become more and more difficult on the court, because you're almost mixing family with business. At the end of the day, at this level, it is a business. Carlos and his family and his team are hiring Juan Carlos to coach. And I think the thing is, you've got to look at this coach-player relationship, and the key really for things to work is, number one, trust. Trust has to be there in any relationship, but in a coach-player relationship, it's vital. And you've also got to share values, and you've got to share a vision. And I think at the start, when Carlos was young and he was 15, they definitely shared the same vision. Over time, that may have changed. Carlos is in a very different situation to what he was when he was 15. There are a lot more distractions now, and you can see Carlos gets distracted. And like you said, Kevin, in this documentary, it's really interesting to hear Juan was very open with his thoughts about what he felt was the right way for Carlos to go. It felt like he wants Carlos to be that much more serious than he is, with his tennis, and almost to be consumed by it, which for some players, that's the right thing. You see that in Jannik Sinner, and you can see that with Ferrero in his career. But Carlos seems to like the life outside of tennis. Now, that's not a bad thing, in my opinion. I think balance is important, but as soon as their values are no longer aligned, I think that creates a little bit of friction. And like Greg said, the timing is the real shocker. I think they were going to split at some point just because of their values, but the timing is the real thing. So it does smell like something's happened this offseason, Greg.
It does feel like something happened, as you say, in the off season. I'm laughing to myself. I can actually hear Kevin Palmer. It's a first for us in the podcast world. His voice is back, ladies and gentlemen. But in all seriousness, if we look at this, the timing says there's got to be a bust up about something, because we're halfway through the off season. You've got about 15 days before the main tour starts and the new year happens for the players. So it's obviously a disagreement about training, work on court, work off court, maybe the schedule, as you said, too many exhibitions. How does this affect him in 2026 going into the first major of the year? We had this discussion, okay, Alcaraz, Sinner, who's going to break in the mix? Well, with all these things happening all of a sudden, everybody's thinking, okay, maybe Carlos will not be at his best down under. This is my opportunity to break up this rivalry, create an upset, get to my first major final, and something different will happen. And we look at the personalities. Alcaraz is more outgoing. He likes to enjoy life. But let's look at the record. 6 majors. And at his age, there's almost nobody in the game who's done that so quickly. Look at McEnroe, one of the greats of the game, 6 throughout his whole career. But Juan Carlos wants him to be one of the greats, and trying to beat that Federer, Nadal, Djokovic records is so difficult. Sinner has that mindset from right now to try to push through the next decade. Juan Carlos Ferrero looks like he's battling with Alcaraz, because Alcaraz wants to enjoy life. So you're in a chicken and egg scenario here, because if you look at it, if you enjoy your life, you're more happy on court. If you're too serious and change somebody's personality, it becomes more difficult. And I think that's where the battle lines happened. And I was hoping this relationship would last throughout his career, like with Uncle Tony and Rafael Nadal, where at the later stages, Carlos Moya as well as Francisco Roig came in.
Yeah, I mean, there's no saying that they may work together again in the future. And I think, if you think of Samuel Lopez, who has been reported to be his Nets coach, who was previously his assistant coach. Kevin, you mentioned, will he have a base? Will he still be training at the academy? I think he will in the immediate future. I think, if you think 90% of his team is going to be the same, it's not going to be a massive difference. And I'm certain that Juan Carlos is going to be, supporting him from behind the scenes. There's other things as well with the coach-player dynamic is Juan Carlos has a family, and it may be that he just needs to spend more time with his family, because it's a brutal thing being on the tour as a coach and a player. And maybe there was just, all of these things accumulated into it coming to a head at this moment. But who knows? They could work together again in the future.
The other aspect, which I'm going to look into, is when he won his first slam, Carlos Alcaraz, at the U.S. Open, how much on-court coaching and banter was there between Juan Carlos and also Carlos? I think that coaching element helped him to win his first major, helped him to move forward, because you're allowed to talk to your player. Is Samuel Lopez going to have the same effect as Juan Carlos from the sidelines? They know the programs. They know what he has to do on court, what he has to do off court. But that coaching facet of saying the right thing at the right time, and that relationship makes that maybe 1% difference between winning a slam and losing a slam. And look, after losing Wimbledon finals, he didn't play very well, Carlos, against Jannik, who played great. He corrected it right away in the U.S. Open and was brilliant tactically and really dominated Jannik in the last major they met at.
I think I would say, guys, is if you look at the record that that Carlos has when Juan Carlos is not there is interesting, because Sammy Lopez has taken charge of a few tournaments. He was at Queens, I think, when he's won it there. He's actually got a 33-2 winning record. So he's only lost 2 matches out of 35 when Juan Carlos Ferrero is not there. So that's an interesting kind of dynamic. We're all sitting here thinking this is a massive blow. This is kind of the end of Carlos. What's going to happen? But
nobody said the end.
When he's not there, there's still absolute brilliance coming from Mr. Alcaraz. So it's not all lost, but it is an interesting tweak in the dynamic with him and Sinner now, isn't it?
I think that's the key. Is it should be a tweak, because I'm certain that, you know, Samuel Lopez was spending a lot of time with Carlos when they were training, and you know, we don't see behind closed doors what this relationship is like and what the dynamic was between Juan Carlos, Samuel Lopez, and Carlos. You know, it could be that Samuel Lopez was leading in more of the tactical and technical work, and Juan Carlos was more of that kind of mental coach on the court with the on-court coaching. And as Greg said, it's now the challenge for Samuel to have a voice on the court, in the box, and that could be the challenge. You know, for any coach, it's a new skill that lots of coaches are having to learn, because, you know, in the scheme of things, it's a new element to the pro game. But yeah, it will certainly be interesting to see how the Australian Open goes, how it goes through 2026. It's a real challenge taking on the world number 1. It's tricky.
It is tricky, but it also gives other players hope, because all of a sudden, yes, maybe Samuel knows what to continue, and when you lose a relationship like that, which has obviously been for 7+ years, there's an emotional part as well. And how do you balance that out? And everybody in the press is going to be asking you, why did you split? Why did you split? And are we going to get the real story, what happened out there? Because all of us are desperate to know. And I've never heard of a world number 1 parting company midway through the off season. It just doesn't happen. So to me, strong egos, that's where Juan Carlos Ferrero has an advantage. He can walk away at any time he wants, and so can Carlos. And that makes a very special partnership, because there's transparency, there's honesty and truth, and that's why they've been so successful.
Greg, I know you're keen to get back onto the tour as a coach. How would you feel about coaching Carlos?
Well, if he called me up, everybody would say yes.
That's the end of our podcast, Greg, if he calls you up, isn't it?
No, if he calls you up, I could still do our podcast. That wouldn't be a problem. But I think he's probably going to go for a Spanish coach. If you look at all the players, you know, we had Dimonor on last week. He's got a Spanish coach through the Spanish formula. They've been exceptionally successful, plus the language, plus living in Spain. So time away for these players. They want to train at home. But nobody would say no to Carlos if he called you up. If I got the call, I would say yes, but it's highly unlikely I'm going to get that call.
You'd be our next guest, Greg, on the podcast, right? Straight away.
Yeah, he would. Yeah. Can you tell us the reason why you guys split?
So Spanish, I mean, I can't steer my head away from Rafa. You know, people are speculating. I know it's only speculations. I'm pretty sure that will not happen. But can you just imagine?
Oh, I mean, the headlines would be going crazy. I don't think it's going to happen, because if you look at Samuel Lopez, he's at the academy of Juan Carlos Ferrero. And Juan Carlos Ferrero also said, look, I would like to get back. I hope this relationship comes again and we can connect again. So does Rafa want to go back on tour? I have a feeling he's enjoying life. He's got 2 young kids. He loves his golf. He loves being at home. He's got his boat. So I don't see that one happening, but the speculation will continue.
Amazing. Well, I guess that wraps it up for Off-Court Cuts. We've got our second episode of the Off Court with Greg podcast coming up, and we're going to be talking about Battle of the Sexes and a little bit more about Alcaraz and Sinner as well. So, yeah, thank you for listening, folks. We'll see you next week.